Hey, good evening and welcome to The Gathering. This is where all three of our congregations, Barnstaple, Bideford and Torrington, come together and have fellowship and celebrate. And it's so great that you guys can join us. And we have Tim and the guys leading us in time of worship. And we have Craig speaking. And it's going to be an amazing time. Enjoy it, guys.
Carried a burden for too long on my own. I wasn't created to bear it alone. I hear your invitation to let it all go. And I see it now, I'm laying it down, and I know that I need you. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, the reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, oh, oh. Saw my condition, had a plan from the start. Your Son for redemption, the price of and I don't have a context for that kind of love. Don't understand, can't comprehend. All I know is I need you. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, the reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Your sights long before my first breath, running into your arms is running from life to death. And I feel this rush deep in my chest. Your mercy is calling out. Just as I am, you pull me in, and I know I need you now. In your sight, long before my first breath, running into your arms is running from life to death. And I feel
good. Is that okay? From time to time when I preach, I do get excited. So I won't apologize for that. The gospel, the good news of Jesus, is an exciting message. And so for me to come and preach and not get excited about that wonderful truth, which has utterly transformed my life, is impossible. So just to tell you a little bit about me, my name's Craig. There will be many here, I'm sure, who don't know me. My wife, Ellie, and I moved down to Devon 3 years ago in August. And God's been about a work amongst us. He very clearly guided us to bring us down here. I can't tell you the story about that today because it will take a while and I don't have the time. But I'm going to be speaking to us this morning from the book of Nehemiah. In Bideford, we have been doing a series on the book of Nehemiah. And it was 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was preparing a message in Nehemiah chapter 7. And I felt God gave me 2 messages. And I'm thinking, this is really weird. I was trying to kind of bring them together, and I just couldn't quite do it. It feels like there's 2 separate messages here. And so literally, I went and preached to God's people in Bideford, and I took both along with me. I'm just like, well, I'm not sure if either of them's quite finished, but I just knew God has spoken to me. And then, of course, a couple of weeks ago, I'm thinking about today, and I'm praying, God, what's the message for your people? And he's like, well, I've already given it to you, you nutter. Yeah, okay. So we're going to be reading from the book of Nehemiah. So if you're not familiar with the story of Nehemiah, I'm going to give you a lightning run through just so that we're all kind of on the same page. But I want to start really by saying this, that God's family, okay, that's us, it's far more important than you think. Okay, God's plan, his story, his big picture is much, much bigger than you think. Much, much bigger. And on this lightning journey through Nehemiah today, I'm gonna just tell you very quickly about the story. So Nehemiah's a guy, if you're familiar with it, please bear with me. He's a guy whose journey's back to Jerusalem. And it's about a century or more beforehand, Jerusalem had been besieged by a king, a guy called Nebuchadnezzar. And it's what God's prophets had predicted would happen, because God's people have kind of systematically and consistently for generations turned their back on the Lord of glory. And so God said there was going to come a day when his people would be exiled from the city of Jerusalem. And that happened in the day of Nebuchadnezzar. So the city, it couldn't be inhabited. There's no security there. The walls are down. And then those amongst God's people who survived, they were taken off into exile. And we read about Nehemiah, and he's living in a place called Susa. And it's something like 800 miles away from Jerusalem. That's where they've been exiled to. He's an ordinary Jew. He's never been to Jerusalem. He's never been to the place that was the city of God, or the holy city, the place that the Psalms referred to as being the joy of the whole earth. And he hears about this. It's been some progress has been made. Some of the temple has been restored. Some of the buildings have been restored. Some of the walls have been restored. But then he gets this gutting, devastating report we read about in Nehemiah chapter 1, that the walls are down. The city is in disgrace. And so Nehemiah, he's a man of God. And so for 4 months, he gets before God. He gets before God for 4 months. And God gives him a vision to restore Jerusalem. And he realizes that in order for that to be fulfilled, he needs to go there. God's calling him back to that city. But he thinks it's going to be impossible, because this guy is working for the king. He's working for the king, a guy called Artaxerxes. And he says, well, it's not going to be possible. It just seems like it's not going to be possible unless he gives me permission to go. And then we read this amazing, amazing verse. And if you take nothing away from today apart from this, take this away. Nehemiah says this: the good hand of my God was upon me. In Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 8. It's magnificent let me just pause for a second. Do you live in the good hand of your God is upon you? That's good news. If you're a Christian today, that is the reality for you. The good hand of your God is upon you. So this guy Nehemiah, he travels back to Jerusalem. He surveys the situation. The walls are literally rubble. They're crumbled down. They're broken. The temple's been rebuilt some time before, but the city is really a mess. It's a ruin. There's no protection. Everything's broken away. And then in Nehemiah 2, 17 and 18, it says this. And I'll read this to you before we arrive in Nehemiah chapter 7. This is what Nehemiah says, talking to the people and the officials. He says this, you see the trouble we are in, how Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned down. And then he says this, come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer suffer derision. And I told them, get this again, of the hand of my God that had been upon me for good. And also the words, the king had spoken to me. And the people, what did they say? They said this, let us rise up and build. That was their response. Beautiful. And it says they strengthened their hands for the good work. That's what it says in Nehemiah 2, 17 and 18. And then we read in the next few chapters, there's opposition. People let him down. There's frustration. There's delay. We just get this picture of like, this is really, really hard work. And then we read this amazing thing in Nehemiah chapter 6, where it tells us the wall is finished. Not only that the wall is finished, but the people were so committed that the wall is finished in 52 days. Nehemiah 6:15. Wow, 52 days. So the wall's fully rebuilt. The city has protection once again. Not all the houses are built. But then we get to Nehemiah 7, and that's where I'm going to read from with you. In verse 5 of Nehemiah 7, it says this. Nehemiah, he's writing this book. He says this, then God put it into my heart to assemble the nobles and the officials and the people to be enrolled by genealogy. And I found the book of the genealogy and those who came up at the first, and I found written in it, these were the people of the province who came up out of the captivity of those exiles whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried into exile. They returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to his own town. They came with Zerubbabel, Jeshua, Nehemiah, Azariah, Ramiah, Nahamani, Mordecai, Bilshan, Mispereth, Bigvai, Nehum, and Baanah. Yeah, I've been practicing reading those out, so pretty good, eh? And then in the following verses, there's this huge list of names of people in this book of the genealogy who'd returned. And we get down to verse 66 and we read, there's 42,360 people plus servants who come back to Jerusalem. People whose names were written in the book. Now, what's the point of all this, you're asking? It's a great story. What's the point of all this? Listen, if you love Jesus, which I genuinely hope you do. If you're a Christian here today, that's who you are. If you love Jesus, this is your story. These are your family. This guy, Bigvai, Azariah, these are my brothers. They are part of my story and they are part of your story. You see, there is a story here in this book, and it's God's story. And it's the story of Zion. It's the story of God's capital city, Jerusalem, the holy city, God's special dwelling place it was supposed to be. God cares about this city. His glory, it seems, is tied up with this city and his people. And he wants this city to flourish and have influence because it represents him. And these people here, the ones who came back from to Zion after a long period, exiled, who'd been booted out because of they'd let God down so badly. They'd let him down so hideously. And God said, no, enough. You've got to go. He exiled them. He thrust them out. And now these 42,360 pioneers recorded in this book, in Nehemiah 7, they come back a generation or so before Nehemiah. They come back, their names written in the book. Brave ones leading their families back to a place where they knew there was no security. To a place where they need to start again. It's like, we'll start a new life. We'll give up everything. We'll follow because God said. Their names were written in the book. It's their story, their home, their destiny. And it's like for them, it's like God wants us back in our city, in Zion. This list that Nehemiah digs out as he starts to assemble the people. And he finds this book, the genealogy, all the names of all the people who came back years and years before. But you see, here's the thing. Here's the thing. This story is all about renewal and restoration. It's all about exile and return. And actually, the Bible is all about exile and return. It's the big story. It's the big picture of the book of Nehemiah. But actually, it's the big picture of the whole Bible. It's a story of exile and return. There's something in us, isn't there? That we feel like we want to have a home. And I guess these exiles, they wanted a home. They wanted to go back to what was their home. I guess for each of us here, we've got a place where we say, this is home for me. And when we're away sometimes, we say, do you know, I just want to be home. It's the place where I rest. It's the place where I kind of am restored. And these people, they wanted to be home. They wanted to be back to their city. But it's part of this amazing Bible picture of exile and return. When you read in Revelation 20, I want to read you a few verses because it's amazing. And it ties into this picture of exile and return. Revelation 20 says this: I saw a great white throne and him who was seated on it. From his presence, earth and sky fled away. No place was found for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne. And books were opened. Another book was opened, which is the book of life. The book of life. And the dead were judged by what was written in the books, according to what they had done. Do you see the point? Just as Nehemiah stood with the people and he read and he pulled out the book of the genealogy, and it's like, is your name in here? Is your name in here? Because if your name's in here, then you're eligible to return. So there's a bigger picture, in the bigger picture of exile and return. And it's written there in Revelation 20. Is your name in the book? Are you in the book of life? Are you one of God's returners? Have you come home under God's authority? Is your name in there? Are you one of God's people in the book? That's the question Nehemiah asked. But actually, it's the question of the Bible. Are you in the book? Are you in the book? And in Nehemiah's day, if your name wasn't in the book, you couldn't come into the city. You know what there is? Jesus said to his people that we are a city set upon a hill. So when we talk about the church, friends, we talk about God's city. And when our names are written in the book, we're welcomed into that city. We're welcomed into their church. I don't know if that book in Revelation, whether, book of life it talks about, whether it's like a physical book, does it have pages? I don't know. But God knows if you belong to him. God knows. There's some record of your life, of my life. Do we know God? Have we known him? Has he known us? Have we got that relationship with him through Jesus? Jesus who opens the book of life. He's the one who welcomes us in. And the big story, of exile and return in the Bible is this: that Adam and Eve sin, they walk away from God's presence. They're exiled from God's presence. And the rest of the Bible is about coming back to him. It's about returning. And even Jesus on the cross, dying for our sin, He's hanging there, and he's exiled from the Father's presence. And he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? He's exiled from the Father's presence, but it's not the end of the story, because it's exile in return. Jesus was raised to life again, glorified. Praise God, it's wonderful news. It's wonderful, isn't it? It's the big picture, you see, of the book of Nehemiah. It's not just about a city. It's about the city of God. It's the church, actually. So in Revelation 20:15, it says this: if anyone's name is not found written in the book of life, they were thrown into the lake of fire. Man, if you're not a Christian here this morning, I can't flower this up for you. Okay, this is really important. The most significant decision you will make in your entire life is your response to Jesus. Without a doubt, no question. Revelation 21 says this: I saw a new heaven and a new earth. The first heaven, the first earth had passed away. The sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them. They will be his people. God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. See, we're not talking about a city in the Middle East. It's a city that God showed to Abraham right at the beginning of the Bible. A city not built with hands, whose maker and architect is God. God's purpose is for a global, international Jerusalem, a global city from many nations coming together to belong to him, living eternally with God in their midst, in the presence of God. A new community, a new hope, and it's the church. So I'm passionate about it because this is Bible truth. You see, Nehemiah's picture, his story, is all about, it points to the big picture of what the church is, the New Jerusalem. And you know, the amazing thing is, God's plan, what he's doing right now, he's building it. He's the greater Nehemiah. He's got his hat on. He's constructing for eternity. What's he doing? How's he doing it? It's the church. We get to be God's city. Zion, you belong. If you know Jesus Christ, you belong to that city. You belong to God's city. Even in this passing age, we get to help with the construction of God's eternal Jerusalem. Beautiful. Oh, so beautiful. God, you have such a wonderful plan for your church. We are those people. It's lovely, isn't it? Even here, even in the present day, we get to play our part in building a better way of being human in God's city. See, the Bible talks about two cities. This city of man, it's the Babylons, the Romes, the Babels, where people live independently of God, building households, marriages, families, parenting, professions, careers, our purpose in life, civilizations even, without respect to God, cut off from God, living independently. And what do we get? We reap this whirlwind of sorrow, of destruction, of isolation, of death, all kinds of evils wrapped up with that. And then we see the other city that the Bible talks about. The city of Zion, God's church, his people, his dwelling place. And the gates of hell will not prevail against her. How good is that? I want a city that's set on a hill and can't be hidden, says Jesus. That's who we are. A bright light who shines out to everybody. That people would see community, Christian community. That they'd see how Christians do marriage, how Christians do money, how Christians do parenting, how Christians do professional life and work and apologies and relationships with forgiving one another. That's the kingdom of God. That's God's people. And I'm convinced that, we, the church, need to show people this is how we do life. Because we're part of a bigger city. We're part of God's people. So we live it out. My longing for you today is that you leave a legacy for Jesus with your life in this present age and for generations to come. You know, these people in Nehemiah's day, there's this whole list of generations. There would have been people who came from those children who came from their loins. What a legacy to leave, who knew God. And I'm praying this, God, raise up people, men and women who say for years to come, for centuries to come, for generations to come, let there be a city of God within this place, here in North Devon. Let there be churches, let there be people who love Jesus, look like Jesus in the way they do life. Because that's what we're called to. That's what we're building. That's why we do church. We're not just coming through a show on a Sunday and, we might meet as 3 congregations once every 3 months. That'd be nice. That's not what we're about. We're about building something. We're not just coming to get distracted from the kids. Not my little spiritual input for my life. No. That's not what it's about. History is about much more than just you and your little life and me and my little life. He's invited you and me into his big plan, his glorious plan, his church, his purpose. It's wonderful. God has called us to establish his eternal community even in this present age. So people can see God's city and understand who he is better. And it's worth our energy, friends. It's worth our preparation. It's worth our planning. It's worth people turning up. Because we're about building his city. We're serving God's purpose. It's eternal. It's the only thing that lasts for all eternity. Beautiful. So beautiful. Nehemiah was all about building a physical city. But the big picture is that it points to our calling to build God's city, the church. For those of you who know me, some of you will have heard my story. My first wife, Karina, died in 2010. And I was left with our 3 children. And I wanted to tell you this because in 2009, in December, Karina was told that she was terminal, that her cancer had gone to a stage now where she wasn't going to medically recover, short of a miracle. And on that day, we went in Royal Berks Hospital in Reading after she heard this to the chapel, and she cried. You know what her question was? Her question was this. Her question was this. Have I done everything that God called me to do? That was her question. What she was talking about was legacy. She said, am I leaving any legacy? Yeah, she left a huge legacy of faith in me and in our 3 children. She left a huge legacy, actually. She left a huge legacy in the lives of so many people who knew her, who saw her faith journey. Now, I've still got to walk that journey. But I had the privilege of accompanying her to the gates of heaven. And but her question was this. Have I done it all? Have I done all that God wanted me to do? You know, when you read the book of Nehemiah and you come to the very last verse of the last chapter, Nehemiah writes this: remember me, O my God, for good. He's talking about legacy. That's the story of the book. It's a story of exile and return. It's a story of building a city which points to the bigger picture that we are called to do. To build the city of God, the church. And he leaves us with that poignant verse at the end. Essentially, this is my legacy. What's your legacy? What do you leave in terms of building God's church for eternity? This is intended to provoke you to build what God is doing in North Devon in our day. See, I've been reading recently about Robert Chapman. I've been reading a little bit about him. An amazing guy. He left a legacy in his own life in this local area. We're living in the good of it, actually. We're living in the good of many of his prayers, I have no doubt. But you know, it's not enough to look back at him. We've got a legacy to leave in our generation, in our locality. We've got a work to do. We've got a church to build, to give to serve in. So here's the questions, okay? If you do family group, you want to answer these questions this week, explore these questions. Here's the questions. First of all, most importantly to everybody here, is your name in the book? Okay, if your name's not in the book, if you can't say, yeah, I'm confident my name's in the book, that Jesus is my Savior, my Lord. I know I've trusted in him. I know my sin's forgiven. I know I'm one of his. I'm one of his children. If that's not you, if you can't say that confidently today, then we'd love to pray with you at the end. Please come out. We'd love to chat with you. Just explain more about the Christian message, the life that you can know in Jesus. You know, my first wife, Karina, she led me to Jesus. That's part of her legacy. I'm so thrilled she did. My life transformed at the age of 25. So good. You'll never look back once you come to him in faith. Is your name in the book? Because it can be in the book. Jesus is the one who opens the doorway for you. That's a question. What about this one then? How are you building this local expression of church? How are you building this local expression of church? What does it mean for you? Are you invested? Are you full on? Are you all in? Yeah, there's loads of expressions of that. It means, are you serving in the church community? It means, are you sharing the gospel with people? Are you prayerfully asking God, what's his direction for your life? Are you getting along to the prayer meeting? What's your legacy? My conviction is God wants our lives to make a difference. That we've got a legacy to leave in our day. What does it mean in terms of how you invest your time? How you invest your talents? What you put your money into? What does it mean for you? I believe this with all of my heart. God's plan for us, for your life, for my life, as that we are to be full on building his church, his people, for evangelizing North Devon for the glory of Jesus. And one day we will depart and be with him, and we will leave a legacy behind us. God's got a plan for each of us. Vic said it this morning in his prophetic word. He said this, you are my hands and my feet. He said that. He said this, I'm more thrilled about what I'm doing, what God's doing, going to do in the future. Turn aside. This was what Vic brought to us this morning. I scribbled some of it down frantically. I was thinking, this fits in with what I'm doing here. I just know God's upon this. What's the calling for you? In Nehemiah's day, in chapter 2, verse 8, when he said to the people, let us build the walls. What was their response? Chapter 2, verse 8, they said this, let us rise up and build. We're all in, guys. We're all in with everything we are. That's who we are. We're for building. And for us, it means building the church. We've all got vital roles to play. So I want to encourage you to get back in the game if you don't feel like you've been in the game for a while. Whatever that means for you. What does that mean for your family? What does that mean about your bedtime with your children? How you do that? Do you pray with them? Do you know what I mean? There's so many applications for us. The question is, what does it mean for you? What does it mean for you in terms of your commitment to church? We get to build the church now, guys. It's wonderful. Okay, I'm going to park it there. We sang earlier on. Tim, do you want to come up? We sang earlier on. One of the songs we sang was this. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. I want to see you. Didn't we? We sang that. to see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love. That happens through the church. It happens through us, God's people. God bless you. May you know the good hand of God upon you. May you know the good hand of God upon you. Nehemiah said that. He knew it. I want you to know it at the end of this meeting today. May you know the good hand of God upon you. Guys, he's with us as we build his eternal kingdom. We're the church. It's our privilege to do this. So exciting, isn't it? It's wonderful. God bless you.
Keep you, make his face shine upon you, be gracious to you. Lord, turn his face toward you and give you peace. Lord, bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you, be gracious to you. Lord, turn his face toward you and give you peace. Shine upon you, be gracious to you. Lord, turn his face toward you and give you peace. His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his favor
Amazing. Thank you guys so much for joining in. I hope you really enjoyed it. And any questions about anything, then just shoot us an email and we would love to get in contact with you and connect and answer any of those questions that you might have, or any stories of what Jesus has done through the service would be amazing as well to share with us. We'd love to hear about that and celebrate what God is doing. And we're expecting for God to do a lot this week. And next week in the evening, Elevate will be returning from 5:30, and that is our service aimed at 20s to 30s, but anybody is welcome to come and we would love to see you there. Have an amazing week. God bless.